Iverson posting in. He wins it. He won the game. Be there to say absolutely no. Three from Scott. Yeah, do you love this game?
Oh, baby, Sixers talk right here with you once again. Danny Pommells and Paul Hudrick. We're brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmu Works. And just like that, The Last Dance is Dance No More. Scott Williams will join us today to talk Last Dance. Yeah, that's Scott Williams, former Sixer, three-time NBA champion. Paul Hudrick. Yeah, that's it, Paul. No more Last Dance.
What are we going to do with ourselves now on Sunday?
Hope the people have enjoyed this. You know, we try to coincide these pods with the Last Dance and give you some juice along with it. What do you think about the Last Dance, man? How'd you feel about 9 and 10?
My favorite was probably 10, maybe of the whole thing, just because I love the way they framed it. I can't remember the author, but the guy who wrote that one book, the way he started it, where he said, yeah, Michael Jordan was great, but it wasn't about how athletic he was and how good he could shoot a basketball. It was about no one was better about being present. No one was, and what a strong message for all of us in this era with everything we have in our lives. And you know what I mean? It's just it really tickled my brain, like hearing that phrase and knowing what we're going through and our society right now with technology and how a lot of us aren't present in the moment and how this is almost this pandemic has almost forced us all to be to an extent. So I just thought that was crazy. And the idea of he never worried about missing the next shot because he wasn't even thinking about the next shot. So I think just that the way they pulled that all together in episode 10, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, man, a lot of layers in this one to peel back. I mean, you look at the Reggie Miller thing, and I felt like watching that, maybe Reggie is a tad bit underrated when I look at what, guards were going through at that time, it being the 90s, and him having to be the guy carrying teams and, doing it from a pure shooting perspective because he wasn't, necessarily, in the post a lot like Michael Jordan could be. And being a foil to Michael. And such a great story he told about the first time he played against Michael, thinking he had him in the bag in the first half. In the second half, he came out and Mike torched him. And ever since then, he's never even called him Michael Jordan again. Just gave him a nickname. Man, crazy that you think about the way that Michael had an impact in this list that's out there in his head of people who spited him and deserved his recompense or what have you or whatever, you know what I'm saying? It's just crazy, man, to think about Mike, mentally the battle that was going on in his mind before he even stepped on the court.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it so many times, just this competitive dude who, if there wasn't a slight, he made one up. So if you actually gave him something like apparently Brian Russell did, you were in big trouble. So you just couldn't give this guy an inch because he would make you pay for it. And you talk about Reggie Miller, and I remember my thing with Reggie Miller was I remember that he was that Pacers team was like the Sixers version, the Allen Iverson, the Sixers version of the Pistons for the Bulls because they just couldn't get through him and they beat the crap out of him. And that's how I remember Reggie Miller. So I grew up hating Reggie Miller. So when I saw that first scene, Reggie just shoves Michael Jordan after the play. I'm like, yep, that's the Reggie Miller I remember. Right. But Reggie, I mean, you got to give the guy credit. Reggie was great. And that Indiana team, man, you forget how good that Indiana team was. They were no joke. Rick Smits could play, man. The Dunking Dutchman, man. That he was such a good
I saw you tweet that you felt like he would be a better player in today's NBA, like super dynamic.
Yeah.
Just you because, see a little Dirk in him? What do you see?
Nah, I mean, not like I don't. But the guy he had a touch from the outside. He shot over 80% from the line for his career. So I'm sure, in the modern era, he could have bumped that out. He could have bumped that out to the 3-point line. And he wasn't the fastest guy, but he was 7'4". He was long and he could move a little bit. He didn't he does. He wasn't super switchable, but a good weak side shot blocker. Yeah, I think he's the kind of guy who could have been good. In this era, they got both Davis, Dale, and Antonio were both tough interior players.
Was Detlef Shrimp on that team too?
Nah, that was post Detlef. But that team was good, man. Because then,
definitely. Travis Best, another dude.
Travis Best, Jesus Shuttlesworth's best teammate.
Georgia Tech was churning them out back then. But you also see what you had brought up before we talked about the podcast, this other side of Michael that Scott Williams is really going to speak to about, the fact that he felt like he was very open-hearted and really a guy who was really, welcoming to people. And, regardless of whatever, the competitiveness side of him, he also had another side of him that was really dynamic, right?
Yeah, going back to that Pacers series, they win. To me, that was like one of the biggest things. They show them winning that series, Game 7. Michael was in the locker room, and he went up to every single player's locker and dapped him up and said, like, yeah, like, we did it. Like, we got through this series, like, this sense of relief feeling. But he went to every single player in the locker room. Now, I get it. There are a lot of things in here that we saw that aren't really – they don't make him look good. They make him look like maybe he's a little bit of a bully and a little bit of a jerk. But then you see this side, and you're like, okay, like, if he's going to be that guy where he's going to push Scotty Burrell and be relentless on him and torture him, but then when they win, he's right there hugging Scotty Burrell. You know what I mean? Like that – there are two sides of that coin. So to me, like, yeah, he felt like he had to be that guy to get to drag people to win like that. But he also acknowledged when they did win, he acknowledged that he respected all of them. And again, that shows up with, I'm sure, something we're going to touch on with the Steve Kerr stuff.
Yeah, definitely, man. I think also, just to your point, like, it was just something about being on the team. Like, you're with me. Like we're together. We're a family. Like I'm gonna be the one that's. I don't know if he always took it like he gave it, but maybe he did. I don't know. They didn't really touch on that, but
I doubt it.
Something. Right, that's always the case, right? People have always said that about certain people, personality wise, but I think that something that also struck me was the fact that, man, like you have so many guys who deal with losses differently, but man, every time Michael had a chance to dig it in a little bit more, we saw that with Patrick Ewing, we saw him and Larry Bird and whatnot, but there was still a sportsmanship there still of them, like, Karl Malone came on the bus to shake everybody's hand after losing that, game 6 to go win the championship, so I don't know. I just think, like, sometimes, you see guys leaving the court not shaking hands or what have you. Like Larry Bird, who played against Michael and now coaching against them, still, they have their relationship, and being on the dream team. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's like you said, Danny, it's not only is it just the trash talk, but there's also just that respect that they can trash talk like that to each other and they're still cool. You know what I mean? Like Larry, him and Larry obviously are fine, but like that was some like elite level trash talk he's doing to Larry Bird after he just knocked his team off in Game 7, telling him to go work on his golf game. Like there's not too many guys who could get away with that, and obviously Michael's near the top of that list. Like, how many guys could trash talk a guy like Larry Bird like that? And Larry Bird, who is notoriously known as a trash talker. So just, yeah, like as much as it was the trash talk there was, it just shows another level of respect that all these guys had for each other.
And I think that was the thing when, even though I hated Reggie Miller, like you said, or hated other guys, I respected their game. So I was still like impressed and like, you're a fan of the league. So it's like, when the matchups come, and I think that's another thing that Scott Williams touched on when it came to Shawn Bradley, which we talked some expansive stuff, which you're about to hear, but is that, other guys were like so dialed into wanting to see the matchups after, outside of their own team. Like, oh man, Charles Barkley and, Michael Jordan are going at his Suns and Bulls and, can't wait to watch it, talk about it when they come back in the locker room. Like Shawn Bradley that wasn't his thing at all. You know what I'm saying? But let's get to the Steve Kerr stuff because, I think I didn't know that about Steve Kerr. I don't know if you did or not, but I didn't know that he lost his father in such a tragic way, assassinated basically in the Middle East. He was a UCLA professor for 20 years, became a professor at the University of America in Beirut or something like that, and was basically two people posing as students came in and, shot him. And I think they related that to Michael by the fact that obviously Michael lost his father in a tragic way by people, ambushing him or whatever and shooting him as well. So, but I didn't know that about Steve Kerr, and it obviously really still struck a chord with him so many years later because you saw how emotional he was just talking about it.
The way they tied that in with the documentary, I thought was really great. It just the way they went from Steve, going through what he went through and how, like you said, how he could relate to Michael in that sense. Both of them losing their fathers in such a tragic fashion, and then the way it builded towards Steve Kerr in that moment when he hits that huge shot in the finals. Like, it's just all like, it was just the way they built that up was incredible. And Steve Kerr, like, seriously, to me, is one of the most likable humans on the face of the earth. Like, this guy, just so smart, so well-spoken, so intelligent, and so knowledgeable. And you can see where it comes from. Both of his parents, educators, and, he's just such an informed and intelligent guy. And in the speech that he gave at the parade, what he said, I guess I'll bail Michael out again. Like, that was just so perfect and so quintessential Steve Kerr. Just the dry wit he has too. Like, he is, to me, one of the most likable. To me, he's probably the most likable coach in the NBA and one of the most likable figures in general in the NBA.
I think another point that you can relate to, him and Michael having so much in common is you heard Steve's mom talk about the battles they had in the driveway where Steve, his brother, and his dad, and, his dad would lose and come in upset. And you heard, Michael, obviously, with his dad is so close to him, and his brother Larry, and, the battles they had, and he looked up to his brother Larry. And it just, the family aspect and brotherhood and things like that, I think is interesting, obviously, with the, not just with the tragedies that they share, but with that as well. But let's get to Scott Williams, right? Like why waste any more time? I want to give some other thoughts on Michael afterward, but Scott Williams, everybody, enjoy this. This was a gem, and I would appreciate Scott joining us. Your NBC Sports Philadelphia podcasts are now on the My Teams app. Listen to Eagle Eye, Sixers Talk, Phillies Talk, and Flyers Talk right now. Yes, a three-time NBA champion. I bet it never hurts to hear that before your name. Scott Williams joining us. And Scott, we appreciate you being here with us.
Hey, thank you guys for having me on your program. Really looking forward to it. I've been jonesing for sports and to talk about sports. I'm normally in bars talking about sports or on TV talking about sports. So with this quarantine, you got nothing on ESPN to watch. You just say, I want to talk to anybody. Somebody give me a call.
Hey, I think Larry Brown really felt that same exact way because he was so candid and open with us when we spoke with him. And here we are going right down the Carolina Tobacco Road, so to speak, because we're lining you up. You got the UNC shirt on and everything.
Yeah, I tell you what, you Larry Brown and George Lynch, and now on to me. You're getting all the Carolina Cats.
Exactly. George Lynch for sure will be coming up on Friday. Paul, let's start us off with. I know you got a hot question to get this thing started.
Yeah, Scott. I don't even know where to begin because of where your NBA career kind of led you to playing with obviously Michael Jordan. And we're all enthralled by The Last Dance and everything we've gone on. We've seen you in snippets, I think, here and there, during that time when you got to be, you were a young player. So I'm curious, you have a career at UNC, where Michael made his mark. So kind of what was that like for you going from North Carolina where Michael had all this history and then you go to be his teammate with the Bulls?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's a funky story because so I come out of North Carolina in 1990, and I had a bad shoulder, and it used to kind of dislocate and sublex on me. And when I went to the combine prior to the draft, a lot of the general managers and coaches weren't sure if I'd be able to hold up to the NBA rigors. It's one thing to do it for 30 games in college, but it's another thing to do it to 80 to 100 games in the pros. So I go undrafted, but I have the opportunity after having a good cry that night. I have the opportunity. Jordan gives me an invitation to play in this pickup game in Greensboro, North Carolina, that he's putting on for a buddy of his named Fred Whitfield. And he invites some pro guys down, Charles Oakley, Rod Higgins, some of the Hornets come down, other dudes that he knows in the league. And I'm looking at this roster of players. I'm going, I need to play in this game because if I'm going to find out what it's like to play at the next level, I got to get used to the speed, the physicality, and remember 90s basketball. I know you guys are old enough to remember that it was physical. And so I needed to get a taste of that. So I go to the game. Jordan puts me on his team being a Carolina guy. And I'm playing okay. I'm getting some old boards and, I'm blocking some shots and I'm running the floor well, getting out in the transition. Anyway, we find ourselves down 1 late in the game. I've got the ball in my hands. I believe it was off an offensive rebound because they really didn't throw this young college kid the ball very much. And I fire one of these textbook two-hand chest passes that Dean Smith taught me right over to MJ, who's on the baseline about 19, 20 feet out. And he goes up, with tongue out of his mouth, patented Jordan form on the jumper, jumps right up over the defender and cans the bucket for the win, right? So he's the one that makes a call to Jerry Krause leaving that game saying, hey, I think Scott Williams might be able to help us out. So that's how I get an invitation.
That was the best damn pass you ever made.
I would make the rookie team. They just going to put me on the rookie roster for Summer League. They didn't even put me on the NBA roster. I had to try out for that, then get the invitation to that, then move on to the veterans camp where there's another 7 dudes trying out for the last spot on that roster. So it was quite the process just to join the Bulls. I always say I am the luckiest undrafted player in the history of NBA, if there is such a thing.
That was a hell of a damn pass, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I almost screwed it up because prior to going to Chicago, I went down to Charlotte. And I thought, this is a second-year expansion team. They're not that good. I played with J.R. Reed for 3 years in school. I'm not as good, but I can hold my own. I was like Kenny Gaddis and some other bigs on the roster. And I thought, I can compete with those dudes, And I go down there, and they failed me on my physical for my shoulder. So later that afternoon, That's when I flew to Chicago. So I nearly screwed it up.
So all of a sudden, you catapult that into a 15-year NBA career. Like that, what a payoff, right?
The best thing about not only winning championships and being associated with being a champion in the NBA back then, or anything for now, I'm sure it's still the same, was when I got to Chicago, I got with pros. Like not just guys that got paid to play the game. I got with guys that were professional about what it was that they were trying to accomplish and all the other game inside the game. John Paxson, Bill Cartwright, Jordan. Those guys taught me how to be a professional athlete. And that was the biggest thing. So when I got to other ball clubs, I had a different mentality than some of the other players. Especially if they were young players, and even some veterans that I was surprised didn't understand what it's like to be a pro. So I was welcomed inside the organization. I lived in the city in which I played. I did all the community relations stuff, opening up new playgrounds, basketball courts, hospital visits. I was first one to go to the community relations department and say, how can I help? How can I be involved? I'm here all summer, just running in the street, running the Schuylkill Expressway up 23 or whatever the case might be, to try to stay going from Gladwin to Bryn Mawr to Villanova. How can I help in the summertime when most of the other guys were taking off, going back to their hometowns? I was right there, and I think it made a big impression. So when I go from city to city, that reputation travels with you, and that was important for me sticking around so long.
So you feel like that elongated your career, but just really first starting out, it had to be a whirlwind being stuck right in the middle of this competitive championship atmosphere and the winning that came with it. It just had to be surreal.
Dude, you got no idea. Like my rookie year was just Phil Jackson's second year, and Michael Jordan doesn't have a world championship. So the attitude from the first night pregame dinner prior to training camp was, we have to have the best record in the Eastern Conference. So if we meet the Pistons, who they had been knocked out 3 previous seasons by, we would host Game 7 in Chicago Stadium because they didn't believe that they could win on the road against the Pistons at that new monstrosity of arena they had in Auburn Hills, the Palace. So everything was hell-bent on that. The intensity, the physicality, the verbal trash talk. Jordan was this tiger, ready to pounce on anybody if they weren't ready to put in the work, if they had screwed up. I'd never seen anything like that. A guy goes so hard in a 2-on-2 drill or a 3-on-3 drill, 5-on-5. I mean, we used to play starters against the subs. That was it. And I think Phil Jackson did that, not to just, put a beat down on the subs every day, but he wanted the starters to get used to the triangle offense. And this is only his second year. All the little variables that went with that, the read and react. There's like some 64 different combinations of how to run the triangle. And we would always get our butts kicked because even if we could keep it close, they just give it to Jordan down the stretch. and Jordan would do some stuff to put us away. And remember, you got 12 guys on the team. We're all competitive. I don't care, if you're not a starter or whatever. You could come from one of your best players on your college team to play at this level now. So there used to be a lot of physicality, a lot of trash talk. But unfortunately, Dennis Hopson always had to guard Jordan. Jordan always guarded Dennis Hopson. And my 15-year career that we talked about is one of the saddest things I ever saw because he would just go at Hop so hard in everything, banging him, physical, verbal abuse. It was really kind of sad, but except for one day, Hop went back at MJ. He threw off the damn gloves, and he was just up in Jordan's grill, talk trash, getting physical, finishing at the rim, and we beat the starters that day. And we never beat the starters. And we practiced at a health club, bro. So we damn near picked up Hopson and paraded him around the health club like he won a playoff series. Like we were going to the Eastern Conference Finals and the NBA Finals. We were so excited to finally beat the starters. It was like one of the coolest things. We thought, okay, this is the start of something, right? This is going to be the start of something now. Now we know the recipe. Nah, George shut all that down the next day in practice going for it. Probably another month or so before we finally beat the starters again.
See, now I have to ask because you brought it up. Were you ever on the wrong side of the Michael Jordan Tiger pouncing during any point of your Bulls career?
Oh, yeah, everybody was. I especially was that rookie year because there was no other rookie on the team. So they drafted Tony Kukoc that year. But Kukoc stays over in Europe and plays over in Europe that season. In fact, for like 3 seasons. So, that they say SHIT rolls downhill. So I was always the guy at the bottom of that hill, whether it be Phil Jackson, Tex Winter, Scottie Pippen, or Michael Jordan. They were always getting on me. I had rookie duties. I had to rack the balls in practice, and Pippen and Grant were known to kick one up into like the second balcony on the road, and I'd go run up the stairs and go get that thing and bring it back. And they put their crumbs and stuff like that under my chair in the film session. I had to get the dust buster out. Jordan be on me in practice or on the bus about showing up with some bad clothing. I wasn't spending no money. I was on a minimum non-guaranteed contract. So he'd get on me about my gear and stuff like that. It's like sometimes like you're ready to fight. You're like, that's it. I've had it. I'm like charging the back of the bus, ready to go at this dude. But you had to have that mentality or he wouldn't respect you. And that's really what it was all about. I mean, when I say about Dennis Hopson, probably one of the saddest things I saw, Hop didn't have that gear. He didn't have that mentality to go. He was a nice guy. He didn't have that, like, I'll fight you. Like, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the best player on this team, the league, best player in professional sports. You had to have that, like, I'm willing to go at you as hard as I'll go at the Pistons or the Knicks or anybody else. And unfortunately, Hop didn't have that. So I think it was like 1 or 2 games into the next season, they had to trade Dennis Hopson because he had just kind of gone into a shell. And Hopson led the nation in scoring. His senior year at Ohio State, 30-plus points a game. He was a 16-point scorer. I think he was coming off an 18-point scoring year from New Jersey Nets that year that we got of my rookie year. It was one of the saddest things I really saw during my 15 years because he was a good player and a good dude, and you just kind of hated to see that. But, everyone talks about this Mamba mentality, which I'm not taking anything away from Kobe Bryant, Lower Merion guy. Hell, he used to play with us in the Sixers when he was still in high school, at St. Joe's, prior to, our season. And all I'll say is not to knock Mamba mentality, but it wasn't nothing compared to the mentality I saw Jordan possess that 90-91 season. It was off the charts.
It's funny you say that because we had Jermaine Jones on the podcast, and he was just talking about, just some of the things we've heard from other people, but just really corroborating that from playing on the Lakers with Kobe Bryant, that, he was someone who liked to show up to practice early, Jermaine, and he would get there like an hour and a half before practice, and he would get there and Kobe would already be drenched in sweat, from, going hard way before practice even started. I'm curious, with all the places you've been, you mentioned, playing with Kobe when he was in high school. You were with LeBron in Cleveland, Stoudemire, Stephon Marbury, Ray Allen, Glenn Robinson. Who was the player that you played with that mimicked that mentality with Mike the most, or came as close to being as intense?
I played with some great guys that were all, someone was doing something with Cliff Levingston and Will Perdue. And one of the great things about this last dance is we all had kind of a chance to reconnect on different pods or platforms or interviews. And Cliff was saying something, I had played with 6 Hall of Famers. Well, I'd never added up how many Hall of Famers I'd played with, but I knew I'd played with a lot of good dudes, a lot of All-Stars, a lot of Hall of Famers. So I started writing them down right after that interview. I'm watching The Last Dance. And, whether it's Steve Nash or Dirk Nowitzki.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
They were some really good players. Not that Dirk's in the Hall of Fame yet, but let's assume that's going to happen as soon as the 5 years passes. I never saw in those guys, in any of those guys that I played with from my first year in the NBA with Michael Jordan until my last year in Cleveland with LeBron James.
You're saying it all now.
That's controversy. Controversy as LeBron, as Michael did, but he had a competitiveness where he wanted to be better every day and put in the work. And I didn't really see that. Now Nash and Nowitzki, we were notorious for like on a Friday or Saturday night, open up the gym at 10:30 when we were all out at the bar, getting our drink on. They're back in the jab on the practice facility, getting up shots. So I thought that was always pretty cool. I used to sneak in there from time to time just to see if it was really true. They never let me shoot with them, but I sit there and I rebound and talk and stuff. But I never saw quite that level that I saw with LeBron, even as a rookie. He used to ask me about cats I played with the Bulls, other teams that I was on. Like Phoenix Suns or Dallas Mavericks with those guys. And he wanted to learn. He wanted to learn what they were all about. How did they go about their craft and stuff like that. And I thought that was really cool that this 19-year-old kid, in fact, I think he was just turning 20 in December that year, was that interested in kind of grasping a knowledge about everybody that I played with.
So we're probably going to go back to Bulls conversation, I'm sure, and more about Michael and all that. But I want to fast forward a little bit from that time to you decide you become a free agent, you sign with the Sixers. And at that point, the Sixers weren't in a great place. You're coming from the Bulls where it was, championship after championship. You come to the Sixers who were really probably at one of their lower points as a franchise. Then they get Jerry Stackhouse and they get Allen Iverson and it starts going up. But I'm just curious, one, when you decided to sign with the Sixers, why you did that, and what do you think you were able to kind of impart on those guys? Because you talked about, that you learned from those pros in Chicago. What do you think, if anything, you imparted to a guy like Allen Iverson or any of that younger team that was that when you first joined the Sixers?
Well, I first joined the Sixers. It was John Lucas was coaching, and we weren't very good. Our best player was a cat named Dana Barros, and we did a good enough job of making Dana popular enough in the league. We got him on the All-Star team that year, and that was about it. Other than that, the year sucks. 24 games. We had some knuckleheads on the team at the time that just didn't have their SHIT together. I mean, we had to have interventions for guys at half times of games. Lucas just tried to save too many cats. Like he was running his clinics down in Houston. He was trying to bring these guys in. They were good ball players, but they just mentally weren't ready to be pros yet. And that was a tough situation for me, that I was with guys that were already pros and we were winning, and we go from that to, knowing we're going to lose a game by halftime, or even sometimes even before we got to the game, the mentality of the players just wasn't good enough. But let's fast forward a little bit past those 24 and 18 win seasons to when we draft Jerry Stackhouse, and he comes on to the squad. You start to see a little bit of a change. But the guy's still young. He only played 2 years at North Carolina. He's still got a lot to learn. He's hanging out with Vernon Maxwell, who's kind of taking him down to, Vern could go out and drink and party all night and still perform the next day. But Jerry's trying to hang with this guy, and it just ain't happening. So we still struggled somewhat. Then we get Allen Iverson, and he's young, and he's coming in, and those guys are still trying to learn how to play with one another. There's a lot of confrontation on the team, and they're getting into fights in practice over who can shake each other down. And trick the other guy and score. You can't shut me down. They're fighting on it. The posses are fighting in the family room. It was a complete SHIT show around the organization. There was no consistency. The coaches were getting fired. The ownership was changing. I think there was only one person there from the beginning of when I started with the Sixers to the time that I left, and that was Alan Lumpkin. It's just like there was so much turmoil and change. There was no consistency. But after they traded me and Tim Thomas away, I think Allen Iverson began to mature. He began to understand that it's going to be more than me just being an NBA All-Star and scoring some points in this league. You had some of that stuff that happened with practice, and you see those videos of those highlights from that presser. I don't really know if that was truly who he was at that point in his career. I know the media likes to hype it up, and even I get into sometimes practice. You talk about practice. But I think he had started to mature, and his teammates were starting to gravitate to him, and he was starting to gravitate to his teammates because he didn't do that before. He sat out of practice. He belittled guys on the bus, and not in a good way, not in a humorous way to try to become a leader. He developed all those things after I left.
You were actually here for the duration of the Stackhouse and Iverson experiment, which didn't work out. And why do you think that didn't quite work out? Why didn't that jive together with them in the backcourt?
Two talented players just playing together at the wrong time in their makeup of their career. And that's the biggest way that I could see it. Stackhouse played for Dean Smith, but he didn't really get the Dean Smith culture in 18 months that he was there. What being a Tar Heel basketball player was all about. He started to learn that more as he went on to, play for a longer time in the NBA, but he didn't quite understand and grasp that when he first came to the team. I don't remember how long he was with the Sixers before they traded him. Talking 25 years ago, the wheels don't run so well anymore, but I do remember them just always having kind of a fight for whose team was it going to be, because it had gone from that time and from the 80s when it was Los Angeles Lakers and Magic Johnson, the Boston Celtics and Larry Bird, to becoming Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, or Charles Barkley and the Philadelphia 76ers. So the league started to market players differently. They started putting players in front of the teams. And I think when these guys start coming in here in the mid-90s, they start saying, I want to be that guy whose name goes before the team. So there was always that confrontation, these guys trying to figure out who's going to be the star of the show. And it didn't lead to good chemistry amongst the rest of us.
I know that one particular night that all Sixers fans know and all Allen Iverson's fans know is the night that he crossed over Michael Jordan, hits the shot, everyone freaks out. I know there's a couple things to that. One, I know that Allen used to get his what's busted about the fact that he idolized MJ to maybe too much of a degree. And some of the older guys on the team used to give him some crap about that. So I'm curious about if you were one of those guys, first of all. Second of all, just that moment, what was that like? Because I know the Sixers bench, everybody in the arena was like, whoa, when that happened. So just what was that all like?
Well, it was great. I was on the floor when all that happened. And, for me, having been a former Bull and having been a teammate of MJ's, I was trying to get that win. I was hell-bent on trying to get that win that night. And when he did that move, he had him up there ISO'd, and it was mano y mano. It was surreal to watch. And MJ kind of coming back from playing baseball. He wasn't exactly 100% where he was. He'd have to tell me the year that was again, but I want to think it was that 97 or 98 year when he was kind of
96, 97, yeah.
96, 97. That was, they're set, into their second championship. So he'd been back for a while. And you realize it's like, okay, this kid's got the moxie. He's not afraid to look the tiger in the eyes and go right back at him. And that was a pretty cool moment, not only for Allen, of course, but our whole team. Like, maybe this guy's starting to become a leader now. Like, it's somebody we can, get behind and rally behind, and he's going to, take us to a place that, as a team player, I knew I was never going to get any headlines. But the thing I liked about basketball was a team sport. And if you played a role and you helped the team succeed, you could feel good about that. I hadn't felt good about that team aspect for several years until we've gotten when we were getting our butts kicked and we just hadn't had camaraderie. But when that kind of happened, it kind of changed the narrative around who this kid might be able to be. And that was a good feeling for us. You feel good about the team aspect again. And that was the whole reason why, I loved basketball, was the things that you could do with 5 guys all working for one common goal. That was special to me.
Just if we go a little bit earlier into your Sixers tenure, you were actually with the team on another historic night, and that was the Willie Burton night. Back in '94, he was playing against his former team, the Miami Heat, and goes for 53 freaking points on 19 shots, which is still an NBA record for someone to score 50 points. Do you remember that night, and what stood out to you then?
Yeah, I do remember. I do remember that night, and I liked Willie. Again, those were the teams where guys had some off the court issues, but on that particular night, Willie could do no wrong. I mean, he came into the arena, and you could tell right from the very tip-off that he was focused and sharp and ready to put in that good effort. He had good energy. Obviously, we were in that mindset. You get a guy hot like that, let's just keep feeding him the ball. You set a little bit better pick. You're flattening the defense. You're running down a little bit harder to bring the defense down as he's coming down. That 22-footer becomes all of a sudden a solid 20-footer, whatever. Those are the types of things that you enjoy about, like, watching somebody perform like that. Even when I was, in the Jordan Shrug game in game 1 of the Portland Trailblazers series, when he's knocking down shot after shot, he goes for 35 in the first half. You're a part of that on the floor because you're doing some of the other things that obviously ain't showing up and the announcers aren't talking about. But you're out there and you're balling, you're feeling the moment, and you're like, okay, this is cool. He's doing his thing, but you get caught up as it. You're like, this is kind of good to watch. So you watch it as not only as a teammate and a player, but as a fan. And we didn't have a whole lot of things to get excited about back then. And to watch somebody go for 50, and like you said, doing on 19 shots. That's what I loved. I hated some of those games I was involved in later with Iverson, where you take 35 shots to get 30 points, and you're standing around, going, I was open.
Right. I could have shot some of those shots.
Miss a shot. I can go 11 for 30 and knock down a couple threes and shoot some 3-pointers if you want to give me 30 shots to do it and shoot 41%. But that wasn't my role. But I didn't appreciate those types of performances just because the guy tried to get 30 points and go do it on 35 shots. So when Willie was able to do it on 19 shots, which I don't even remember, so it's kind of cool that you bring that up. That was something special to be a part of.
You talked about the maturation of Allen Iverson, how he was, he became a different player, after you were traded and you had gone to Milwaukee. And speaking of which, you guys, link up again in 2001, an epic 7-game series. What did you see in him, from the time you played with him to that moment when you played against him and he was really at the peak of his powers? Like, what was the difference, and what did you see in him around that time?
More leadership. And the guys rallied behind him, even an all-star and Hall of Famer, Dikembe Mutombo, Aaron McKee. Yeah, thank you. Eric Snow, all those Jermaine Jones. I could go on and list all those, Tyrone Hill, all those guys. I mean, they had a solid squad, very talented players. If I remember correctly, MVP in Iverson that year, Defensive Player of the Year, Sixth Man of the Year. And I want to say Larry Brown even was Coach of the Year that year. So we're playing them as the Sixers. Yeah, we had some All-Stars and Ray Allen and Glenn Robinson, but we didn't have that kind of star power to go up against. So it was a difficult series for me because I didn't like the way I was portrayed when I traded away from Philadelphia. I always thought I was a good dude and always worked hard in the organization, and it didn't work out for me there. And I think there was bigger expectations of me coming over from the Bulls where I'd won. And you could say what you wanted to say about me about as a player not living up to things, but a guy that was always professional and working hard, only to have people inside the organization try to damage that reputation, that was hurtful for me. So I wanted to beat them so damn bad. I wanted to bust Larry Brown in the mouth so bad. And, I hated Allen Iverson at that moment. I had to have that internal hate.
Of course.
It got me to that next year. You heard me talk about Jordan talking about some of the things he talks about in the next dance. So he gets to Clyde Drexler and uses that as a little extra motivation to play harder or whoever the case might be. I had to have that as well. So I hated Tyrone Hill and Dikembe Mutombo. So that was kind of giving me some motivation. And of course, I laid a couple eggs in that series, got in some early foul trouble, maybe as I'll be a choice of being too worked up. But there's a play in game number 6 where we're down 3-2 in Milwaukee, and Iverson's coming down the lane. And I get tired of picking up ticky-tack fouls in games 4 and 5 and was on the bench with like 4 minutes to go in the first quarter. I decided I was going to hit whoever came down that lane as hard as I possibly could. And Iverson comes down that lane for a layup early in the game, and I absolutely crack him, back, shoulder, ass, everything into a forehand shiver. And he falls down like a bag of dirt. And they whistle me for a flagrant foul, which it was probably a flagrant one for sure. But the guy just gets up. He doesn't react. He doesn't charge me. He doesn't throw a punch. He doesn't do anything to get himself kicked out of the game. And that was maturity he wouldn't have had the first 2 years that I played with him with the Sixers. And that's when I could see that, okay, this guy is in a spot now where he understands how important he is to the team and how to lead a team. He actually went on to score, I want to say, 40 points in that basketball game after I cracked him. So, that was one of those things that made me be a little bit more impressed of now who the player he is. Actually, I'm getting suspended for game 7 too. We ended up losing that, but that's for another story.
Hey, I'm curious. It's funny because with the growth you saw in Iverson from earlier in his career to later in his career, it was probably the opposite descent from when you came to the Sixers and Shawn Bradley was there, and then you saw him again in Dallas. Would you agree with that, or like what did you see in Shawn Bradley when you first came to the Sixers?
Yeah, they were promoting Bradley as he was going to be the star of the team. 7'6", had the ability to score inside if he got the ball close to the basket, obviously. But the problem with Shawn was he had no desire to want to put in any work other than what was required of him by the team. He wasn't a student of the game. He didn't watch basketball when he went home at night. Like, there could be a great matchup with Jordan and Barkley of the Suns or something like that, or the Houston Rockets, and we'd all be talking about the game next day in the locker room. Oh, did you see when? And you talk to Shawn. No, I didn't watch the game. Time after time after time. It wasn't just like an occasion. And you're like, how are you not watching some of the best, actually, his best players? And you could tell just he played ball because he was tall. That was it. And it's not to say he wasn't a nice guy and he didn't kind of work hard when he was there and he was a good teammate. He just wasn't interested in doing anything more to make himself better. So you saw him kind of go the opposite direction. Teams would get excited about having him, whether it was in Philly, Jersey, Dallas. And then after a while, you see kind of the mentality of the player and you go, this is never really going to happen for this young man, not to be as dominant as he could be with his height. Now take on like a Yao Ming, who's 7'5", and goes on to, average a double-double, 20 and 14 or 25 and 14 for his career. The only thing that slows him down is injuries. So it was two different mentalities that those two tall players had. Unfortunately for Bradley, he never wanted to be a baller. He just played for, hey, this is a good ends to a means and socking some money away.
I'm curious. You kind of alluded to it earlier, but I want to get a little bit of clarity on this. We had World Be Free on the podcast, and
that's World B.
Isn't he though?
He's the best,
greatest. Yeah, he's the best.
I love World B. You guys tell him I said hello, will you?
We will. He corroborated a story that many people had speculated about, weren't quite sure about. I wanted to get your perspective on this because you mentioned practicing at St. Joe's. There was a time when Kobe came up to St. Joe's with his dad, and they were playing pickup. And this is all according to World Be Free. They were playing pickup, and they needed a guy. Stackhouse was there. Vernon Maxwell was there. A bunch of people, and Jelly Bean was encouraging them to let Kobe play. And Kobe ended up playing and ended up, according to World Be Free, giving Jerry Stackhouse the absolute business. Do you remember that? Do you remember hearing about that? Were you there for that? Give us some perspective on that.
I don't remember if I was there for that particular time. I was there pretty much all the time. So I can't say that I wasn't. But I do remember Kobe playing and me going, damn, what school is this kid at? Like thinking he was at a college, right? I didn't know early on that he was just going into his senior year of high school. So he had them kind of skills already.
So this was junior year into his senior year then.
I believe that's what it was. Okay. He might have been going in his junior year for all I know. I'm trying to remember the exact year. I want to say this was like 94, 95, 95, 96. We practiced St. Joe for 2 years. So I can't remember what year Kobe would have come over. But if Stackhouse was on the team, then it had to have been my second year there. So I'm going to say 95, 96. And I was coming off a knee surgery, so I may not have either been playing or been there for that particular time. But the kid had skills, and you could see that right away. In fact, he was going to go to Carolina. So we were all excited that, this is a good opportunity for us to get another stud.
Everyone said Kobe was about to come. The Duke people say Kobe was coming. The UNC people say that.
The LaSalle people say it. The LaSalle people think he was going there. It's like, come on, he wasn't going to LaSalle. It's so. But
back in the day, if Dean Smith wanted one of the top players, Duke wasn't Duke the way it is now. I guarantee you, we were going to get Stackhouse. Get Kobe Bryant for sure. But anyway, yeah. So you could see right away that the kid was going to be a stud, but he was just a little scrawny, and we played a man's game. So even a kid that was talented, as scrawny as he was, you start getting physical with him, and you can slow him down a little bit. And that's kind of how the NBA, kind of was back in the day. So, did he dominate Jerry Stackhouse? I don't want to sit here and say he dominated any of the guys that were on the floor, but you knew he was capable of holding his own. That's for sure.
Scott, one last thing on Michael Jordan. I'm just curious because Michael has said that he was a little apprehensive about releasing The Last Dance because he felt like it would give people a different perception of him or like him less after they saw what they're seeing in The Last Dance. When you kind of get your memory jogged about the way Michael was and obviously the perception of, bullying and, people, being hard on people and things like that, do you feel like it was a little much looking back on it? Or do you feel like, man, that's what it takes to win?
I was a little, I don't want to say, I'm not disappointed or upset with anybody with the way they felt, because this Last Dance, if anything, it has been truthful. No one's been fed any lines by some director or by ESPN to try to sensationalize anything. What you get is what is kind of actually happening. The stuff about Jerry Krause or the stuff with Scottie Pippen or Dennis Rodman in Vegas and going to with Carmen Electra. That stuff happened. No one's trying to sugarcoat it or play anything up or down. And that's what I kind of love about it, because some of the stuff I was there for and some of the stuff I didn't know about and I'm learning about for the first time, and it's kind of cool. One thing I will say is Judd Bushler had kind of a big thing where he said, guys were afraid of Michael Jordan. Like, well, I don't think I was afraid of Michael Jordan in any way. I loved being his teammate, and he was hard on me. Not the way probably he was hard on Scotty Burrell, but he was hard on me being a Carolina guy. I mean, I had my locker right next to Jordan for 3 years, which was not a good thing after before games because the media would mob and you couldn't even get your underwear on after a ball game. You had a shower, I get a change. But I like the way he pushed guys in practice. They say that the harder the battle, the sweeter the success. Like, he didn't have a championship when I got there. Oh, I knew it was going to be hard every day in practice. And then being a rookie, I just thought that was normal. I was not afraid to put in hard work. If you came to the team and you just were about the NBA lifestyle of you wanted some money, you wanted some clothes or cars, a little bit of fame, you wanted to hang out in the club, and you want that part of it, and you weren't about putting in that work. You weren't about getting in that lab and getting after it for those 3 hours in the morning, those 3 hours in the afternoon, and banging and being physical and knowing the scouting report, knowing the players' tendencies, and not screwing up sideline out of bounds plays or for messing up on timing. He was on you for all those types of things. I remember looks in games where he's looking at me like, and I go, oh yeah, I totally remember that because I could see that in his eyes. Like, oh, you won't hear about that after the game, and you're like hustle over and you try to get to the right spot. But that was one side of him, and he'd get on you. I remember having a holy sweater one day, and him, he said, I could play 18 holes on your sweater, 9 holes on the front, 9 holes on the back, just embarrassing in front of the team and stuff like that. It's like, but that was MJ. That same cat would call me up my first year in the league and be like, hey, Scotty, Juanita's cooking dinner. Come on over. Be here at 6:30. Be here at 7. We're going to break some bread, have a few beers. We're going to watch something on a basketball game on TV and shoot pool. It's like, so that was the other side of it. He knew my parents had, my situation with my parents. And and I know no one in Chicago. And that's that guy. I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm there. It's like, that was great. So there was a double-edged sword to that. And everyone's got their own little stories. He used to come to the front of the plane where Will and Pax, myself, BJ Armstrong, we're playing little $5 hands of blackjack. In the back, they dropping hundreds and thousands of dollars, in the back. But he'd come up and say, okay, I'm going to be the bank. Bet whatever you're comfortable with, especially if you, whatever, matter of fact, bet what you're uncomfortable betting. That's what you want to get you, like, oh, no, I'll play my little $5, maybe my little $10 hands. And he didn't want to have to do that, but he did it because he didn't want to separate himself from the rest of the teams. Like, okay, I'm playing back here with Scotty and Horace and some of these other dudes. But I'm also going to come up and play at the front of the plane. So those guys know I'm still trying to connect with them. You'd be at a restaurant and 4 of us having dinner, and all of a sudden, we ask for the check, and we're like, oh no, it's been taken care of. We're like, wait, what? Who? It's like the gentleman in the back, and there's MJ back there, maybe with one security guy, and he picks up the check, or he waves us over in the back of the club and say, come have a drink, I got a bottle, like stuff like that was always appreciated, even though we knew the next day in practice, you better be ready to perform. He's going to be, riding your ass.
It's funny you say that because it seemed like Will Perdue kind of took a little bit of exception to the fact that he was coming up and playing those blackjack games, but you felt like it was more of him just kind of making himself one of the guys.
Yeah, that's how I saw it. Like, okay. He didn't have to come up here and start playing with us, but he just said. He did it in 2 ways. Yeah, he maybe wanted to take a few bucks off you. You have some bragging rights on the bus ride to the hotel or whatnot. But I think he did it more from the standpoint of, I want to be a part of what you guys got going on here too. I remember him having everybody over to his house one day after practice, about 7 of us going over there. And he had gotten into golf. And every freaking golf manufacturer you might imagine just started giving him tons of stuff. And this is now before he had big monstrosity of his house. He had a nice sized crib, don't get me wrong, but he had a 3-car garage and he could only get 1 car into the garage. He had so much golf gear in there. So he tried to get rid of it and giving guys, okay, you get these clubs and in this bag, and here's a case of balls and here's some gloves and all this stuff. I got 2 sets of Michael Jordan golf clubs, one from Ping, got the Air Jordan logo in them and all. I'm like, oh, I ain't using these. I'm holding on to these, man. Selector's item one day. I got those in the storage facility, And he got Michael Jordan's club with the Jumpman logo embossed on him. It's like that's pretty cool stuff. And I'm like, most dudes would just take him down to wherever. But he's like thinking about his teammates. I don't know where some of these guys get this. I'm afraid of Jordan, and all he was a jerk on the court and a bully. There was a side to him that I truly enjoyed.
It's funny you feel like the documentary is not embellished like up or down, because that's a lot of the criticism that people have had, particularly like Ken Burns, a documentarian, has come out saying that because Michael, got his fingers on it and he had a say in what the outcome was, that kind of makes it less of a documentary. But you feel like what we've been seeing has been pretty accurate.
Yeah, there's always people going hate. Haters going hate for sure, And I don't know how Ken Burns would get his information to say anything's not factual. That's just his opinion, maybe not knowing. But everything I saw in there, especially the stuff about Jerry Krause, which was kind of tough to watch early on. Krause had some good qualities and some bad. And we all had our own little run-ins with Jerry Krause. Mine was never contractual, but he said some things to Dean Smith about me that weren't true. And I was ready to throttle that fat little neck of his the next day in practice after Coach Smith told me that. It's just like he had good eye for talent. He drafted Pippen. He drafted Grant, traded for Cartwright, didn't trade for Paxson, but he put together not only some quality players, but guys that wanted to play team basketball and support a superstar in Michael Jordan. He was real good about that. I don't know if he gets quite the credit for that, maybe in the documentary, that he probably should. And I think maybe because he didn't, it led to him doing some things that pissed a lot of people off. Mine was the Pippen, was the Dean Smith stuff. But I know he used to always talk about Tony Kukoc to Pippen. And Pippen's like, dude, I'm an NBA All-Star. I'm a 3-time world champion, or a 2-time champ at the time. And you're telling me about some guy over in Europe? I mean, European ball wasn't nothing before the Dream Teams went over there. And even for years after that, still wasn't nothing. Soccer was the most popular sport in most of those European countries. So we're looking at this dude like, you're not even playing like that's not even high Division I basketball. Like, there's teams in colleges that can go over there and beat some of the top teams over in Europe. You tell us about some cat you drafted 2 years back that ain't even with our squad. It's like, oh, you can't wait till you get Tony Kukoc here. He's going to show you guys this, that, and I'm going, this ain't going to sit well with these guys. So when Jordan and Pippen go over there in 92 and they face off against Kukoc caught hell as a result of what Krause was talking about. Not anything Tony did. Scottie Pippen doesn't go in that 1.8 seconds against the Knicks, not so much because of what Phil Jackson drawn up to play Kukoc, but I'm sure it had something to do with it. But it's like Jerry Krause going on and on about Kukoc for all them years. And it's like, here you won't give the guy the ball where I've been the MVP for this team for this many years, and you want me to take the ball to bounds and be a decoy? It's like Pip snapped, and wrong, he did that, but they didn't go on, to show how good he came back in Game 4 and things of this nature. But I think it was very accurate. I don't know how much more accurate it can be. I mean, even to the point where the language in you can see emotions that are pouring out of Jordan in the game. Episode 7,
right.
It's kind of tough to watch when Jordan has that ask for that break when he was talking about pushing his teammates sometimes places they didn't even want to go. But he wasn't just about trying to be in the same category as Bird and Johnson. He wanted to be way up here above those guys and the sacrifices that it takes to get to those levels is, I'll pull you along with me. If you don't want to come, I'll get rid of you. And not so much by going to management and telling them to cut you, but by riding you so hard, making life so hard for you on the floor, on the team, that you'll want to get traded, or management will have to trade you as a result.
Last question for me. You said your locker was right next to Mike's. Obviously, you played in that pickup game with Mike. You went to UNC. You knew Michael really well. Based on the documentary, they make it seem like him walking away from the game after that third championship was because he was so burnt out. And that he had been talking about that prior to even winning the championship, even as far back as, with the Dream Team. Do you remember him saying things like that? Like, man, I think I might want to walk away, or him talking about baseball or what have you? Do you remember things like that?
It's kind of difficult for me to answer this question because I got to go back to right before my sophomore year at North Carolina. My father shot my mother and killed himself. Right. And I know what kind of pain that is to lose a parent to a murder, because you feel like you were robbed. Someone took something from you, and it's a pain that is deep from just. It's always tough if you would have lost a parent of cancer or some sort of liver disease or car accident. I know what that kind of pain can be as well. It can be tough, but it's a little bit different when somebody deliberately does take your parent away from you. I was very close to my mother, and Jordan was extremely close to his father. We never went 2 weeks without seeing Mr. Jordan around practice facility, a home game in Chicago, the dead of winter, on the road someplace, maybe down in Charlotte if we were going to play down there, or Atlanta. So I knew how close they were, not as just father and son, but as friends. And I always felt his love for the game was still strong. And I know it took a lot out of him those 3 seasons we played with him. And I'm sure he was burnt. But generally by the summertime, he was refreshed, and he was those smoldering eyes in practice and training camp again. And I think he would have gotten to that point, maybe not immediately to start the season, but he would have got to that point after the competition started going. But when his father was taken from him, I think he didn't want to have to deal with the pressures of being Michael Jordan, the best athlete on the planet, best player in the league, doing the media, doing the sponsorship stuff, doing all the community relations things, and not be able to grieve the way he wanted to. And everyone's different. Everyone's situation is different when it comes to that. But I always felt that his love for the game was so strong when he was able to handle those emotions. And I was 6 years removed from my situation at this point. I still had bad days. I didn't want to deal with anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. All this stuff would come up with my mom. Like, I don't have my mom here to celebrate these championships with me. And when she used to rebound hoops for me in the driveway, and all these things that you remember about your parents, and especially in those types of situations, I think he was just like, my dad saw me play my last game. I'm kind of burnt out. I got to deal with these emotions. I'm going to sit out. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to sit out my sophomore year at Carolina. Coach Smith was like, no. But as it turned out for me, the best therapy for me was being on the court with my teammates. And I think when he had the baseball, that was good therapy for him. He was with his teammates. He was riding the bus. He was buying them. He bought the bus. He was doing all those cool for his teammates. But when the strike happened, then all of a sudden he didn't have those therapy sessions anymore. Not to say that he was meeting with a shrink, but for those 3 hours when he's batting practice and all these other types of things, when they had that strike and he wasn't going to break the picket line, he decided to come back to basketball. And I think and thank God he did. Because even if he hadn't retired in that year and father hadn't been murdered, there's no doubt in my mind we would have gotten back to the NBA Finals again that year. The Knicks were coming on, but we took them to 7 games with Scottie Pippen as our star player. Jordan wasn't going to let us lose a series. So in my opinion, I thought we would have won at least in 94 and probably again in 95. But it's great to see that he came back and proved himself as the greatest player of all time, because I don't think you're sitting here talking about this 10-part documentary on the first three-peat if they don't have the second three-peat. It would have just been a nice run. It wouldn't have been a dynasty the way it is now and propelled him on to be the greatest player ever.
Man, Scott, we really appreciate you being candid with us and sharing your story as well as all your memories. And it's really been exciting and some great gems, man. We really appreciate it.
Well, Danny and Paul, thank you guys very much for having me on. I asked you before we started if you wanted me to be truthful about my time in Philadelphia. It wasn't the best. we were fans growing up, so tough players. But I always enjoyed my time in Philadelphia, regardless of the success the team had. I guess a great area. One, I wish I never would have sold my house out in Gladwin. I had a great spot, 2.5 acres right across from the Philadelphia Country Club in the main line. I think about going back there someday, but life moves us in different directions. So thank you guys again for having me on. Let me reminisce a little bit about those times 20 years back.
Much love and respect. Thank you, man.
Anytime, Scott. Thank you.
Wilmington University extends its deepest appreciation to the brave individuals who are working tirelessly on the front lines to protect, serve, and care for us during this unprecedented time. Thank you. WilmU stands with you. We appreciate Scott, like I continue to say, because, to be candid, as Scott was, he said, hey, do you want the honest truth? Do you want to, me to give it to you, like it is, or you want me to kind of sugarcoat it? We're like, no, we want, what you actually believe and know to be true. And man, he gave us that and then some. Right?
First, we got to talk about the fact that Scott Williams, man, I feel like that dude is destined for bigger things as far as broadcasting goes. Like, he is legit. Like, he's just got that personality to him. He's got the voice for it. Like, that guy's got a future, a big time future to me, at least. But yeah, the stories he had, like, just everything. I mean, it's crazy how much his career was directly influenced by Michael Jordan. Like, might not be in the league if he doesn't make a pass in a scrimmage to Michael Jordan. He might not have had a 12-year whatever NBA career. Like, it's just nuts to think about that. And then he goes to the Bulls and, does what he does there. And he had let's be real, he had a decent career. Goes back and plays the Sixers after he was with them for a while. Plays them with the Bucks. He's a starter on that Bucks team in the Eastern Conference Finals. So, really cool stuff by Scott and just an awesome and unique perspective.
So we look at this Last Dance, Paul, like, so many people have talked about the LeBron and the Michael stuff, Kobe and whatnot. For me, after watching this, even though knowing what I already know, there's just a difference between the type of player and person that he was, having seen him play and seeing all this background, then and LeBron, not that I know him, intimately or have had access or anything like that, but if you really look at it, much of his career and life has been chronicled on television from, however, his freshman year at St. Vincent St. Mary. So from then to now with social media, the banana boat stuff, the decision, you know a lot about LeBron James that you probably didn't know about Michael Jordan. You know what I'm saying? Like if you compare the two, like, you probably learned a lot more about Michael and probably have now a better perception of Michael that you probably already had of LeBron from the access that's been given. So I feel like it's not even comparable, the greatness of Michael to LeBron yet. Maybe LeBron will get there at some point because his career is still being written, but currently there's really no GOAT conversation to me. Like, it's Michael and maybe Kareem and everybody else.
This whole thing, pandemic, not being able to watch live basketball, having to dig up all this historical stuff, watching The Last Dance.
It has dug it all up. It has dug it all up. It
really has. No, it really has. And for me, I have settled on this, and I'm just going to stay on this, and I don't really care. You want to call it a cop-out? You can call it a cop-out. I don't care. And Larry Brown's one of the people who said, he's like, I get so turned off when we all start having these greatest of all time conversations.
We just watched a 10-part series.
I know, but it's because, listen, it was all different. What you just brought up, though, Danny, is a prime example. Michael Jordan, could you imagine what we talked about it in the social media world with that team, what they would have gone through with Michael Jordan, Dennis Rodman?
I could not imagine.
Insane.
I could not imagine.
Exactly. LeBron has played his entire life in the public eye, and he has not a whiff of anything. and he's done and everything's been on the straight and narrow the entire time. And I'm not saying that to say that I think LeBron's better. I don't. What I'm saying is it's eras. All these guys played in different eras, had different struggles, had different factors. They're all different. LeBron is the greatest player of this era. Michael Jordan was the greatest player of that era. Magic and Larry were the greatest players of that era. Like that's the reality to me. I don't think that we can just say, I get it's fun conversation, but to just say, oh, Michael's better and LeBron's 2 or LeBron's 1 and Michael's 2, like I can't do that because it was all so different. And you can make the argument that maybe LeBron had it tougher in the finals, but Michael had it tougher going through the Eastern Conference. So like the arguments for me are just so varied and there's just so much variable that to me it's all talk. I don't think we can – I can't. Maybe you can, Danny, and you can if you want, but I'm going to say that greatest of the eras because everybody had to deal with something different.
Paul, that was such a level-headed answer. I mean, oh, my God. Did you guys just listen to that level-headedness spewing through your speakers? Oh, my gosh. Sorry, I got to clean up some of the level-headedness over here. It's on my floor, man. I'm sorry. I'm gonna just leave it alone. Like, what can I say? How can I follow that? Like, you don't follow kids and babies and Paul's level-headedness. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, animals, babies, kids. Yeah. All right. I'm just saying, man. It's just. I don't understand how like nothing has happened since Mike was the greatest until this point to change he was the greatest. Like, no one has toppled him. You know what I mean? That's all I'm saying. But. The 10-part documentary has festered that. It's brought it all up. I mean, yeah, maybe we don't, but even if this would have aired after basketball in that little sleepy lull of summer, it would all be the same to me. We would still be having these same conversations. It would just be at a different point. Would it have been as intense or as frequent? Probably. I mean, this documentary is on crazy numbers. Would it have done crazy numbers after basketball? Yeah, it will probably be the same conversations. But, yeah, I get it. Our producer, Ben, is saying that it's not even a fun conversation anymore. And he loves to argue. So maybe that says right it all right there. But last word, Paul. I'm giving it to you, man. What are you feeling? What are you thinking?
Yeah, for me, I know a lot of people wanted, there was that whole Ken Burns quote where he says it's not really a documentary and blah, 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 blah. And Ben, our producer, I got to give him credit. I think he put it the right way. Like, no matter what the documentary is, it is through somebody's eyes. So there is some form of bias in anything we ever do. You can't help it. Even when I write articles and I'm just reporting news, I have stuff in my brain and some biases that as much as I try to quell them or as best as I can do, there's still something there that's editorialized to an extent. So nothing is ever going to be 100%, especially when you're talking about a documentary, 100% subjective. Objective. It's never going to happen. So to me, it's anyone who's complaining about that, just enjoy it. Enjoy it for what it was. Yes, we all know Michael Jordan had to approve it all, yada, yada, yada. I get it. That didn't make it, to me, any less enjoyable. Like you said, Danny, I got plenty of good nuggets that I didn't know before. I learned a lot of stuff. I got some intricacies. I now know it was the food poisoning game and not the flu game. All this little stuff I now know. So to me, I enjoyed every second of it.
Imagine the social media world when, Tobias Harris or Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid decides to leave the team during that Toronto Raptors run, or they get to the finals and shows up on professional wrestling. Like, what in the world? Dennis Rodman, out of control. It was great, man. I mean, it's just something, you can relate to. You'll go back and watch. They did a great job with it. It was amazing. And I cherish it, man. It brings up great conversations with my kids. You know what I mean? They ask questions. I like to answer them. Like I said, I have a connection to Mike, a little more because my grandfather hated basketball until he saw Michael play. And then, he used to call me telling me when the games were on. So, what are you working on the website, Paul? I saw you got the worst draft picks.
So over the weekend we had the worst trades of all time.
Worst trades, okay.
So there were those. Then I just did something on since there's so much uncertainty, we don't really know what's going on. Just a few point guards that if the Sixers, going in the next season, guys they can look at as to kind of be backups for Ben Simmons and maybe push Shake Milton for that backup role a little bit. So I got a few of those up, and then we're going to have a whole bunch of stuff this week, way more draft stuff, and just tackling more of like the hypothetical kind of things too, like the what ifs. I know Noah Levick did something on what if that reported Dr. J for the number, the Michael Jordan pick winds up happening. How does that change everything? So we're going to tackle a few more of those kind of things as well this week.
And it's worth mentioning, we will be airing the 1983 championship series, right? On NBC Sports Philadelphia. So
just the wins, because that's all we want to watch anyway. Let's be
just
real.
Just the wins. Okay. Dang, but that cheat. Well,
wait, there are only wins. What am I saying?
Yeah.
It was 4,
So the
4,
sweep,
5, 4.
right. Yeah.
So what am I saying? There are only wins.
Well, we'll be there for them all, regardless of because there ain't nothing else going on. But golf, NASCAR, back in action. We'll see. Slowly things are coming back to normal. But hey, thanks for making this a normal part of your day. Sixers Talk brought to you by Wilmington University. WilmU Works for Paul Hudrick, our esteemed producer, Ben Berry. The level-headed one, Paul Hudrick. Don't let me ever forget that. I'm Danny Pomels. We'll see you next time.